We switched computers and then it worked.
Try this again. Okay, awesome. We're going to talk about probate records today. I do not claim to be an expert in probate records. In fact, I don't claim to be an expert in anything. And when I was deciding what classes I wanted to teach, I love wills. And so I thought, let's learn about probate records. So I've gone down that rabbit hole and found some, what is to me, interesting stuff about probate records and wills. By definition, probate is the proving of a will. However, probate courts cover more than just a will and are some of our country's earliest records. I think on Ancestry, the earliest one I saw was 1633. So, you know, where some of the other records don't go quite so far back, a lot of times a will can prove relationships for us that we might not be able to find elsewhere. In some places, most places, it's called the probate court. In Maryland and Philadelphia, it's called the orphans court. And in New York, it's called the surrogate court. So when you're searching for wills, keep those three titles in mind. Some of the terminology that goes with probate records. Testate, estate. So a testate estate is an estate with a valid will. And there's three kinds of wills: a testate, holographic, and nuncupative. Try saying that 10 times. So an attested will is drafted by a third party. For example, your lawyer or a state representative will write up the will for the testator, and then the will is signed and witnessed. A holographic will is written, dated, and signed by the testator in his own handwriting, and it may or may not have a witness. A nuncupative will is orally dictated to the testator by the testator. It's usually when they're on their deathbed, so they can't write it in their own handwriting, and there's not time to have someone else draft it. And it may require 3 witnesses instead of 2. So cases of that, sudden sickness, or during wartime, where it's a matter of time is of the essence, those wills might come into play. The testator or testatrix is the person who makes the will. And you'll notice as we go through the terminology for wills, the IX ending or RIX ending just means it's a female. So OR is a male, IX is a female. Then you have the executor or executrix. That's the person named by the testator to carry out the terms of the will. And again, that's just male and female. And then a codicil is an addendum to an existing will. It usually has to be witnessed also. And then you have intestate estates. And those are estates without a valid will. And in those cases, the court will appoint an administrator or administratrix. So even though they haven't written a will, if they have property, it might still be in the probate records because someone might come forward and do an intestate probate. So then you have personal property. So that is property that is movable. And a common term for that we see in the wills is chattel. So I've often seen that term and thought, does that mean the cows? You know, I wasn't too specific on that, but it's a general term for movable property. And it's willed by bequeath. So when you see the term bequeath in a will, it's for the movable property. Real property is property that is immovable, such as land or a house, and it's willed by devise. So I've read before, when I studied this, I remember reading in a will, I devise and bequeath. And I thought, well, that's kind of saying the same thing, isn't it? But now I understand that one is personal property and one's real property. And then oftentimes there is a guardian, or sometimes there is a guardian involved. And they're individuals that are named by the court. Or if the minor child is over 14, a lot of times they can name the guardian. And they're to guard the financial interest of a minor or an incompetent individual in an estate. So if someone had an accident when they were young and it made them mentally incompetent, or someone who doesn't have the capability to make decisions, like I have a Down syndrome uncle, they would be given a guardian. In the case of my uncle, when his parents passed away, his mother was the last to pass, then my father and mother became his guardian. And so they were in charge of all his dealings. So it would be kind of the same thing. It can either be a minor or someone who is incapable of making a decision. If a child is less than 14, the court is going to name the guardian. And that also creates a record in probate court. Oops. Okay, so the process of probate. And it's going to be just a little different at the beginning if it's an estate with a will or a testate estate than it is if it's intestate. So if the will is written, dated, signed, and witnessed, and also it should contain the name, an executor will be named and the heirs will be named. So that's all done while the person is living. Then after the testator's death, the executor petitions the court to begin the probate process. So that's going to create a record also. Then a notice of the probate and court date are published in the local paper. And you'll find those in newspapers often, where it will list that this person is deceased. There's going to be a court date, and that's just to let anyone know who might have a vested interest in that estate. So not only would that be heirs, but it would be creditors. If that person owes someone money, that's kind of their signal to go ahead and come and make note of what they're owed. Let's see. So in court, the will is presented. The witnesses give evidence, and those are the witnesses of the will. So they were the people that said, I know him, I saw him make the will, I've seen the will. And then any heirs or potential heirs may contest the will. So we'll talk about it in a little bit, but probate trials, probate cases can go on for years, especially if someone protests what's in the will. I had a friend who her mother, it wasn't a great relationship, and her mother in her will willed her 3 daughters $1. And the reason she did that is so that they couldn't protest the will as saying she just forgot me, or, and so she willed them all $1. Let's see.
Which opens the will.
Huh?
Which opens the will to protest. If she'd left them
Oh.
out completely, they couldn't have done anything. But when you put $1 in, you have made them an heir. And so then they have the right to protest the will.
Well, and if they could prove they were an heir, they could protest too.
Yeah.
That
The dollar
was,
opens it for sure.
yeah, and it was pretty much her way of leaving them out of the inheritance. If the will is valid, the judge will issue a letter testamentary. And what that does is it gives the executor the legal authority to act on behalf of the estate. Now, for an intestate estate, the individual has died without leaving a valid will. Oh, I missed one on intestate. So if the will is declared invalid, it's thrown out and then it becomes an intestate estate. So if there's no valid will, then persons with interest in the estate, such as a potential heir or creditor, petitions the court to begin the probate process and be the administrator or administratrix. And so if someone, someone's parent doesn't make a will and passes away, then the children can go in and say they've passed away. We need to go through this process. It could also be done if there are people that are owed money by this person. They can go in and start the process of probate so that they can get their share of what is owed to them, which I had never thought about that, a creditor starting the probate process. Now, my sister, and it's not an easy process to go in and prove this. My sister's husband died intestate, and so she had to go through the whole proving of I am his spouse, he is really deceased. This is what he owns. So it's a big process to go through something like this. Notice of the probate and court date are published in the local newspaper. And then in court, the administrator or administratrix is assigned by the judge because you might have more than one that petitions. So they're assigned by the judge and they are given letters of administration, which again gives them legal authority to act on behalf of the estate. So once the authority is given to the executor, administrator, or guardian, they signed a bond with sureties or a bondsman. And you hear about this in both marriage records, in wills and different records. And a bond is a guarantee that the executor, administrator, or guardian does not, if they do not fulfill their duties, they will pay a sum to the court.
They have to put that bond up.
That's where the surety comes in.
Okay.
So the surety or bondsman is a person or entity who agrees in writing to answer for the debit or default of another. Because I would see that kind of at the end and kind of wonder how that works. So the person, the executor who's been named by the court might not have the money because they said sometimes the value of the bond is the value of the estate. So you wouldn't have that type of money to put up. So an surety is a person who might have access to that funds, if it's an entity or a person that would be able to pay that. And that's just kind of insurance of the day. So an estate is appraised and inventoried. I read somewhere that they can assign up to like 3 appraisers. And then it's inventoried. That inventory is given to the court of all of their property, both real and I just forgot. Chattel.
Chattel, yeah.
Personal, there we go. All their personal property. So a dower may be set aside for the use of the widow, and we'll talk about dowers in a minute. So the guardian assigned is if the potential heir is incompetent or under legal age. Part of the estate may be sold to pay creditors, settle the estate's asset, or support the widow and minor heirs. So I had a great-great-grandmother who was declared insane and put in the asylum. She just had a young child, and I believe it was her 5th or 6th child. She'd had a couple that had passed away already. And she probably suffered from postpartum depression. She told the doctor she thought all her babies were going to die and things like that. And so this was 1880s, 18. And so she was put in an asylum. Well, while she was in the asylum, her husband passed away. And so she was given a guardian. At the time, it was her father, but then he went to court and asked to be released from that guardianship, and it was then given to a Mr. Parks. And so in her file, and because it's part of his estate, every time Mr. Parks had to go pay a bill or go to court, it was recorded. And as he paid for different things for her, those receipts are in that estate, including the receipt that they gave the person who went and took my great-grandmother to get clothes because she was being adopted out. And so, they have a receipt for that. So there's a lot of information within these trials or these court cases that we don't even think of. Let's see. So you'll see a lot of that. And then, like I said, these can go on for years. So often the person managing the estate will have to give a yearly accounting of payments to and from the estate, because someone might owe the person who passed away money. And so that would have to be collected also. So to end the process, the executor or administrator files a petition with the court to end probate. And again, a notice is published. So even if these records might not be available, you might find something in newspapers about them. And if it's a big enough case, there might be an article written up about them. It might not just be in the public notices, but there might actually be an article written up about them. I know I've seen one somewhere, it'll list what they inherited. And then the final settlement is filed with the court. And there's also a dissolution of assets or property. And so sometimes that's listed. So dower rights. I just find these interesting. Dower rights are based on British common law, and it allows a widow a portion of the spouse's personal property and a life estate, which is the right to live and benefit from a portion, usually 1/3 of the husband's land or real property. And it's not normally in areas that were settled by the Dutch, French, or Spanish. So like down in Florida, you're probably not going to find dower rights as part of the legal proceedings, but anywhere that the British settled. So Florida, California, Texas, those places, not so much. But the 13 original states and kind of around those, you probably will. And it kind of actually spread west. We had them in Idaho at one time, but they have been abolished since then. So early land records will often mention the dower rights and have the wife sign off her rights when the land is being sold. There's also a thing called courtesy right, and that was the right of the husband to receive a life estate to all the wife's property, only if the couple had a child during their marriage. So if the husband didn't have anything when he came into the marriage and she had inherited all this land and property, and then she passes away, he would have access to all of that, well, as long as they had a child, until the child was of age. So courtesy rights, we don't have them in Idaho anymore either. Courtesy rights. And in fact, dower rights started to be replaced by what were called the Married Women's Property Acts, essentially saying that they had a little more control over their property and what they could say happens with it. So the first one was in 1839 in Mississippi, and then it kind of gradually spread. And only, let's see, I don't know if I put it on the slide. Only Kentucky and Ohio still have dower rights. So this is a 1799 deed of property. And it is in Barnstable, Massachusetts. And it is Benjamin Hathaway. And it says Benjamin Hathaway to hold as foresaid, and that I will and warrant and devise the same to him, the said Benjamin Hathaway, and to his heirs and assignees forever, against the lawful claims and demands of all persons whatsoever. And I, Abigail, the wife of Pegleg West, I love that name. Abigail, the wife of Pegleg West of said Barnstable, in consideration of the above mentioned sum, will and truly paid to my son, Stephen West, do hereby resign and make over and forever quit claim to all my rights of dower, and forever and power of thirds, which is about usually what they were given in their dower, a third, that I have or may have to the above described premises to him, the said Benjamin Hathaway, and heirs and assignees and blah, blah, blah. So in a land record, if someone was purchasing land in that time frame, they would often have the wife, or in this case, it was the widow, sign off their dower rights so that after they purchased land, she couldn't come back and say, I didn't get my, my fair share. And that third, keep in mind for the real property, it wasn't hers to buy, to sell. She only had that for her lifetime to live on, or to live on the profits thereof. And then it was to go with the inheritance, usually to a child. So the dower was just for the time, the rest of her life. So researching probate records. If a husband left everything to a widow, you want to check her will for heirs. So if the husband dies first and leaves everything to his widow to use in her lifetime, check her will to see if it lists the heirs. Don't limit your research to direct line. Childless or single relatives may have named your ancestors, because they didn't have anyone else for the property to go to. So a lot of times nephews will be mentioned. I remember reading one where she goes through several of her nieces and nephews and which clothes they get, which brooches they get, and kind of describes them even. So it can give you a lot of information. Landowners usually had wills. So you want to use census, land, or tax records to establish ownership. So on a lot of the censuses, I think 1860 and beyond, we'll talk about property and show whether it's owned or it's rented or mortgaged. So you can kind of go through those census records to see who might have property. A lot of times they are going to be the ones that create a will. I think they said only about 10% created wills. So if they had land, you have a better chance. And you want to check all the places that they lived when you're checking for your wills. The probate process can take years, so use a wide time range. Even if they died in 1884, you might go clear up to 1900 to look for those probate records. I've seen them take 10 or 15 years before. Not all are indexed. So you want to search website catalogs, search through collection titles, and then use browsing techniques. So when you have a website that has a database, you can type in the information and it searches for all the deuces in Massachusetts wills, which is great. But the browsing is when that information hasn't been indexed. So you have to go, there's usually indexes at the beginning of the probate books. You can go in and look at those, see if your name shows up there. And sometimes when they do the indexing, they'll index, or so indexing is where someone takes the information, puts it in a database and makes it searchable. And then there's the index in the front of the book that I'm talking about. I just realized I'd said like index 4 times in that one sentence. So sometimes the owners of the collection have indexed the index, and those are searchable. And then they'll have page numbers to the side, and you can go browse through the book essentially to find those page numbers. And that's where the Price is Right higher and lower game comes in. Because when you're on a film and you're on the index for deuces, it'll probably say it's image number 10. And then Thomas Deuce is found on page 73, 116, and 123. Well, you can't put 73 in there and for the image number, and it'll take you to page 73 of the book because you're already on page 10 for the index. So what I usually do is I add that number to whatever I'm on, and that'll get me close to the image, and then I can go higher or lower depending on what the page number of the image is that shows up. Does that make sense? We'll play a little in a bit. So let's go to Ancestry first. Well, actually, no, let's go to Family Search first. So when you're starting to search for these wills, you really need to keep in time the location and time frame of where you want to look. So we're going to go to the wiki. And you can do by topic on the wiki. So you can go to Probate Records. And it has some great ideas for researching out your probate records. Some of the things it can tell you, some examples it has. And that will help you learn kind of how to research them. But when you're searching for a specific will, it's better to go to the page for that place. So we're going to go North America, Massachusetts. Oh, I got to do US first. And then we'll go Massachusetts. And then once you're on your state, over here on the side under record types, there's going to be probate records. And this will help you find out what probate records are available for that location. So this first section is online resources. We can see that there's several collections for probate records for Massachusetts, some as early as 1635. And then if it has a little arrow, it's within Family Search. If it has a little dollar sign, it's outside Family Search, most likely Ancestry. Oh no, the Ancestry wouldn't say, so this must be a different site. But if it has the little thing, it's outside Family Search. But it talks about the history of probates, different repositories where they might be, websites, and then references. So you can go down to county if you know which county it is. But let's just choose Massachusetts Probate Records 1635. And this is going to take us to an ancestry collection for it. And then you can search from there. The other place on here to search for wills is to go to the catalog. So the catalog's just a little different. It's what is available, but you still want to search by location. So the United States. Let's do.
And is there like on censuses a time?
72 years.
Okay.
So
I like that. Answer that question.
she asked if there was a time limit where they won't publish census records. It's 72 years from the time of the census. So this last in 2022, the 1950 census came out. I can't believe we're in 2023 already. We've had it almost a year. So then the next one will come out in 2032.
So what does
It'll
probate
be
and
1960.
wills, do they follow a rule like that?
I don't believe they do because the person is deceased and it's a court record. So you should be able to send to the court for that record. As far as being indexed and published online, I think this one goes up to 1991. You can certainly search newspapers to see if there's an announcement for a probate court case, and then contact that county clerk and see if you can do a records request for it.
Do the states put restrictions on them like they do on marriages and divorces?
I don't think they do. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I don't think they do. I recently looked up a guardian and conservatorship court case that took place in 2019 in California, and that was online. So, there's a little more openness, I think, with the records than something like a death record or a birth record. I don't know that you have to prove relationship like you would with one of those. So let's do Idaho. Kind of winging it because I hope they have wills in for Kootenai County. I hadn't searched that one before. But when you're searching on the catalog, you want to go highest entity to smallest. I usually stop at the county level. So here's the probate records. So there is a probate index for 84 to 1970 for Kootenai County. Now, if I did Massachusetts, there's going to be a lot more that you could go to. And my guess on this one is it's going to be one that you have to browse. In fact, it has not been digitized yet, which is unusual. I thought they had all the films digitized. So let's do Massachusetts. Because I know they have such a long history, they're going to have a lot of options for us. And we'll do exit. So then we go through their categories again. And we can go to probate records. There's below, I don't know if you saw it, said probate records. For indexes, there's 2 collections of those. And then there's all of these that are probate records. So when you click on that, will bring you to the films. So the key means you have to be at a family history center. I am on my personal computer, so even though I'm at the Family History Center, I can't open that unless I get on a Family History Center computer. And that's just one of the contingencies that are put on that collection. So each collection of data that we have has different promises with the collection owners. So some you can view at home, some you have to be here at the Family History Center for, and very few you have to be in Salt Lake to see. So we would be able to open that and browse through. And I believe the same information is on Ancestry. So Ancestry has a different contract with the owner of the collection. And so they might be able to show the images. So it's good to try more than just one database. So in Ancestry, the way we got to this one was through the wiki, the link in the wiki. But if we were to search on Ancestry for what will and probate collections they have, we could go here to keywords. Now, I would probably do wills first or probate, but you want to search for each one of them. So if we put in probate, it looks for anything with probate in the title. We can do search, and then down here we can narrow it by court and land records and wills, estates, and guardianships. And so that gives us a list, and we can see some of them are in the Danish West Indies, probably not for my family. So then we can narrow it by location. We can go United States. Although I did have 1% Oceania, I noticed one for Oceania. My son swears he's Polynesian now. And then we can go to Massachusetts. And it's going to show us the different collections it has for Massachusetts probate records. And if you put wills in, you get a few different ones. So that's why for keywords, I'd use both of those. But you could also do it. Let's go back to the beginning. When you're doing it through the catalog, instead of even putting a keyword in, you could narrow by to just the wills, estates, and guardians section, and then narrow by your location. So that might bring about a few more results too. Let's do Connecticut this time. So that's going to give it like, it has a few that don't have probate or will in them. Estates of American English settlers. So it might be better to go by location and then do wills, estates, and probate. Okay. So let's pick a record. Anyone have a place they want to look up a record for? If not, we'll go with Connecticut and Stoddard's. I know there's some there. How do you feel about your reading skills? So on this side, we can see where it says table of contents. Some of them just say will papers, other have kind of more laid out information as to what's in there. They've got the cover page, the account papers, the petition papers, more account pages, inventory pages, administration papers, sales papers, and more administration papers. So it's a fairly hefty file. Why don't we go there? And when it comes up, so sometimes we get the hints and we're like, okay, I'm going to attach it to that person. So more than ever, this is where you need to go to the original documents because it's not all going to be on one page. We saw how many things were listed for that person. We might be reading through several pages. for that person. So we want to click on the image to open up the viewer. I'm going to close that window so we have a little more room. And we can see down along the bottom all the different pieces of paper that are included. Pretty much every little scrap. So it goes to 440. And it started at, so about 21 pages or images. So I'm going to close that so we can see a little better. And this is just an accounting of what's in there. Tells what town he was living in at the time. And this is 1771. And this is kind of an accounting. I'm not sure. Different people that are owed. And this is, yeah. So that's the beauty of having it digitized though. If we really want to read it, we could come in real close and it would say to going to Ebenezer Brewster's to get copies of a note Robert Stoddard gave him. So this is where he's listing what he has to do. The administrator is listing the different things and why he's essentially charging the estate to go do this stuff. So let's go to the will part. I think those are the witnesses. What he owns, inventory of the estate. Can you believe they had formed stuff back then? And now all men by the presence that we, so these are the witnesses, Mortimer Stoddard of Groton and Jabez Deming of Norwich are holden and stand firmly bound and obligated to Charles Phelps, Esquire, Judge of the Court of the probate for the district. Stonington. In the penal sum of 500 pounds lawful money of said colony to be paid to the Charles Phelps Esquire, Judge, or to his certain attorney or successors in said office, of which payment well and truly to be made. So these are the, this is the bond, $500 in 1771. I imagine that's quite a bit of money today. So it must have been kind of an extensive estate. Oh, sorry, 500 pounds. Like I said, well, and back then it was probably sterling silver, so it might even be higher than what we have now. Okay, I'm gonna bring up the film. You can click on the little film thing to bring up the film, seeing if we can see the will a little faster. Yeah, yep. Let's find one that's got a little. Let's see. I'm gonna do Thomas Stoddard. And also you'll notice, especially on some of these older ones, they lay out the land descriptions on here are awesome. It's like 6 rods and so many chains from the stream to so-and-so's back door. I'm not sure how I clicked on. Actually, I have one on here. I just didn't want to bring it up because it's hard to see on this screen. Do it that way. To see it. Or maybe not. Invalid registry. That's new. Okay. So are there any questions while I'm bringing this up? Is there any places that you have in mind that you're looking for wills and probate? Ohio? Cool. We could do that. One case where probate record came in handy for me was the only information my sister had on one of her husband's ancestors was as to her birth was a 50th anniversary published in the newspaper that said she came west to the Wisconsin area from New York. She named the county in New York that she was born. But they had no idea how she'd gotten to Wisconsin. You know, they could not find her parents on census records. So I went to Probate Records in New York, and sure enough, I found her guardianship in that county by the name that she'd given. And it said the people she'd come with was the family of Robert Young, and we couldn't figure out why who we didn't know how she was related to Robert, came to Wisconsin. So going through the probate records, she first was granted guardianship by an uncle, who then said after a little bit, I can't do it, and was granted guardianship to another uncle, who after a little bit said, I can't do it, and no one could find him. And then there were a list of possible guardians in the next court case. And one of them was this woman, I think her first name was Sarah, and she ends up marrying Robert Young, wife of Robert Young. So that's how the Robert Young brought her to Wisconsin. So that's Ohio. We want wills, estates, and guardians. It also is good when you're looking for a death date. It doesn't always list the death date, but often the will, you can look at the will and the probate date, and they're not too far apart. So it really narrows the window at which the person died. And sometimes it's listed in the notice, even if it's not listed in the court records, the date of death. Okay, so let's go to one of these wills. Any particular county? And we can see they're broken up into administration and guardian appointments. So those are most likely going to be intestate estates. Guardianship document and applications for guardianship, the general index. See the general index. That's the introductory slides. So this is, looks like one that's printed off of a computer. So we would find our person. Samuel, let's say it's Samuel Amory. It tells when it was probated and what volume and page it's on. Now, once you're in the collection, and can someone remember the volume? It looks like 1026, and someone remember the page. Because once I click out of here, I won't remember them. So you can click and it'll show you the other films that we saw on the side that are listed in here. So that was on the general one. So if we go down here to journal, oh, there's 12, 17, and 24. Oh, here's 26. And which page was it? Okay, so here's where higher and lower comes in. We'll put in 106. And that looks like maybe 196. And what one are we looking for? 106. So it's going to be less. So let's try 75. That's 135. Let's see, 60. Which makes sense because it's two-sided. That's a hard one to read. Let's try the other page. Might be 107. Let's go over here and see if it's 100. Okay, so then we just need to go up. That should be 102 and 3. 105. So this should be 106. Oh, but this isn't going to be our thing because this is 1864. So then let's see what else it would be under. General index. Volume 1.
In the number in the first box, it was like a 5-digit number in the first box. I don't know what
I'm not sure.
The one that says volume 26, there's administration doc. What was the date?
The date was 81. So does that fall in on 2022, 1895? So the other thing we could do is go by date rather than the book. Wills. There's a whole bunch of volumes for wills, just not the, well, there are 13 shows up, 22, 26, and it goes to 1884. Let's try this. Okay. 42, so it's counting 2, so about 20 less, 86. Oops, not 866. Richard Jones. Nope. So this goes to where you would figure out how the records are being kept at the state. But you can go with it. I mean, there's probably a couple other places in here we could try, but you know, I just don't want to beat a dead horse.
Yeah.
But it's fun to read through them. I like the ones from the 1600s because like the first third of it is all about the judge telling how he has the authority to hear the probate, and you know how close he is in relationship status wise to the royalty back home. But they're fun to read through. They do have a lot of information. If you're looking for married names for daughters, that's a great place. It often lists the husband along with the daughter. Even if they're deceased, they're mentioned in the will sometimes, and it will tell you they're deceased. So that can help narrow your range of where you're looking for the death for that child. And oftentimes it will, if they are deceased, it will list the deceased child's children, because that's who the inheritance is going to go to. And they do have what are called laws of succession, and they're different for different timeframes in different states. And that's pretty much who's allowed to inherit. And so again, you'd have to go by location and do a Google search for laws of succession to see at some point, you know, certain people weren't allowed to inherit, or even certain people weren't allowed to own land. I mean, you had to be of a certain social status at times to own property. So I hope you have fun with it. I hope you go home and try finding some wills and try reading through them. It's a great exercise in handwriting too. And some of them are really fun with the abbreviations, but I do enjoy them, and I do think they have a lot of value in researching our family history. So any questions? If not, you had fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That will that you showed us of Benjamin Hathaway,
Mhm.
was that?
So that was actually a land record.
Okay.
And there have been cases where people have found wills within the land record, because it's one way to prove ownership or to prove the succession of that property.
I'm
So-
curious of why you were looking for because I have a Benjamin Hathaway in my family
Oh,
that I've
do
been
you?
searching for. That's too early for the one I'm looking for. It was around Civil War time.
Would he be back east?
I think they were in Iowa. He was the brother of my husband's great grandfather, and
Uh-huh.
I can't find him after like 1960 something or 1860 something. So I just was curious of why you were
Prior
looking
to
at
1860? I was going with the peg leg on that
the
one.
peg leg. Okay.
That
I
was-
just was curious of why you picked that one.
Oh, for the handwriting and
Okay.
and for the name peg leg, because I just love it.
Okay.
I didn't see a G in there though. It looked like Kelly.
Oh, probably.
It might have been.
Yeah,
She
I was
liked
looking,
peg leg
where's
better.
the peg leg? It's
She liked that one better.
You know how you get something in your head and it just won't go
Yeah.
away?
Now, is this, the people that are listed on here, those ones that are
Watching from home.
watching from home? Okay. Okay. Lewis That's a family
Kim, did
name
you
of
say
mine.
something?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm just listening.
All right. Well, I was going to go ahead and close out if you guys don't have any questions. So have a good week.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Pam. That was great.
Thanks.